We are back with more FPL content amidst all the UCL fantasy videos and live streams. This will be the transfer tips for Game Week 23, and there's a lot to discuss with that double game week in 24 for Everton and Liverpool, and also some single game week players who have performed very well recently, like Justin Kluivert, who is the most transferred in player at this point of the game week, and I don't see that changing until the deadline on Saturday. Be sure not to miss that deadline stream and also the best wildcard team, team selection, and much more by smashing the like button of this video, getting it to over 200 likes, and subscribing to the channel. We're looking to get to new goals this year, like 32,000 subscribers, and also check out all the links in the description below, like my Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, the Discord server, FPL League, Draft Hound, as well as Spotify, and also hit that notification bell on YouTube so you never miss a single upload. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. After a disastrous performance against Manchester United several weeks ago, some people actually sold Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I was quite adamant in terms of holding him at least at that time. And just a few weeks before that, I was talking about buying Trent Alexander-Arnold, and the same goes here. You've got Ipswich Town at home next in Game Week 23, and then a double, which isn't the easiest on paper, against Bournemouth away and Everton away, the last Merseyside derby at Goodison Park. That should be a good one. Then you've got Wolves at home and Man City away, who have found a bit of form recently, so that fixture might not look as appealing as it once did a couple of weeks ago, but all the others are still quite promising for Trent. He can get an assist, a clean sheet, and some attacking returns in general, but the assist will be the main crux of his output. He doesn't score too many goals, only just the one this season, but he does take free kicks, set pieces, and that's 13 big chance created this season, and many bonus points as well, which is what gives him that platform for a double-digit haul, which is going to be better than any other defender in the game. He also has 42 key passes, which is incredible for a right back. His expected assist figure is 5.89, and if you want to triple up on Liverpool, Salah is undoubtedly number one in terms of the best assets, but Trent Alexander-Arnold would be second. Who is the third best Liverpool asset for Double Game Week 24, you might be asking? I think that's ultimately team dependent, because I don't think much separates the likes of Gakpo and Virgil van Dijk, who ultimately would compete for the third and fourth best spots for that Liverpool triple up. You've also got Alisson in goal, who got a 9-pointer against Brentford, and several others like Konate, who might offer decent value, but his recent comments about playing on painkillers ever since returning from injury isn't quite, going to fill you with confidence, let's put it that way. And if you've got the money, Salah and Trent are undoubtedly the two you want to target. And for that triple up, I think Gakpo will make a lot of sense for many FPL managers watching, because the likes of Nicholas Jackson in your team might be stinking up the gaff, and a simple transfer where you downgrade him to Gakpo and it gives you extra funds to then buy Trent at the back can work very well for your setup. But that doesn't mean Gakpo is definitively better than going for Virgil van Dijk. But I also look at Liverpool and I ask myself, do I want to double up on them offensively or defensively? And in an ideal world, it would be the attackers, because I could see them conceding some goals, mainly against Bournemouth and Everton, but they'll score plenty themselves and create opportunities. And with the news that Diogo Jota will be out for several weeks, I believe that cements Gakpo a little bit more for the double game week, and starting against Ipswich Town. That's 10 consecutive starts in the Premier League, and Gakpo scored some clutch goals in recent weeks, although he has faded in the last two performances, so to speak, against Brentford and Nottingham Forest. But I just look at it as Darwin Núñez, who came off the bench, being the hero for Liverpool, competing with Luis Diaz for the striker role. And Diaz is definitively a left winger by trade, but I think Gakpo is the first choice in that position right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And we could have a blessing in disguise here with the huge gap between Bournemouth and Everton, and you've got some cup games in between like Plymouth. You could see Gakpo rested in such matches, but ultimately that Champions League lineup tonight against Lille will be very telling. If Gakpo is benched there, you'd be very confident he starts against Ipswich Town over the weekend, and he's got a great chance of starting both matches in the double, but admittedly, that isn't guaranteed. With Gakpo's underlying numbers aren't particularly great, if I'm being honest, but he's got 12 bonus points, 6 goals and 2 assists, and decent ownership at around 9.3%. This will definitely rise to double digits once we get to the Game Week 24 deadline, but if you can get Gakpo early against Ipswich Town, who just shipped in 6 goals against Man City, I think that could be a great play for your FPL teams. But it's worth mentioning some of these stats. His XG is 4.28, only 38 shots, 14 of them being on target, and 8 big chances, but Gakpo is clinical and he scores a lot of goals from outside the box. I highlighted Jean-Philippe Mateta as a purchase several weeks ago in an updated transfer tips video, and he has done extremely well since then, scoring a brace against West Ham and getting another return against Leicester City. He's got some good upcoming fixtures, and you could point towards the fact that 4 of the next 6 games are actually at Selhurst Park, home matches there for Jean-Philippe Mateta, but I would argue Crystal Palace are better on their travels. They're unbeaten in 7 away games in the Premier League, so that actually might not be as promising as it sounds on paper. But Mateta has 8 goals and 1 assist for the season, 18 big chances and 88 FPL points. He has been very clinical recently with great fixtures. He's really capitalizing on all of those opportunities, and he remains a massive differential with 5.3% ownership. And if it wasn't for Gakpo having a double game week, I think Mateta will be the standout at that price and below to invest in, even over Chris Wood, who has tougher games on the horizon. He's also an accessible price point at 7.3 million, so Mateta is still worth purchasing. I don't think it's too late, but I have to say the home fixtures aren't as appealing to me as they would be to others. Another forward I'd recommend as a short-term punt will be Ollie Watkins, but my concern with any of these Aston Villa strikers is the rotation. I think Watkins is undoubtedly first choice right now, but that could change in a couple of weeks, and not so long ago, it was Duran who was the starting striker for Aston Villa until that suspension against Newcastle. But the next 3 fixtures, if Ollie Watkins can start at least 2 of those, I think he's got an extremely high ceiling. He's got back-to-back 8-pointers against Everton and Arsenal, and in that latter game at the Emirates, he played extremely well. There was no William Saliba, and he capitalised fully, and I have to say Watkins' movement is up there with the best in the Premier League, and it was a great finish to equalise against the Gunners. He has 10 goals and 4 assists this season, despite it being an underwhelming campaign by his lofty standards. He got 19 goals and 18 FPL assists in the last season, but 28 big chances is incredible, 110 FPL points. He has been outshone by the likes of Isak, Chris Wood, and even Matheus Cunha at times, but Watkins is slowly creeping up to the best forwards in the game. Once again, he's been getting the goals consistently for 4 consecutive seasons, and his XG is 11.13. The creativity isn't too great, and there was a massive overperformance last year. I highlighted that at the time, and we're never going to see those sorts of numbers again. But goal scoring wise, he's always there in the box, getting some great chances. In fact, he's got 54 shots inside the box this season, which is very healthy, to say the least. If you are in the market for a forward and you've got the funds, I think a great short-term punt would be Ollie Watkins. Phil Foden has 48 points in the last 4 game weeks. No players outscored him in that time frame. He has been brilliant for Man City recently. He had a terrible start to the campaign, and I actually bought him around game week 9 as a Saka replacement, but just like the story of my season, I've been too early or too late with some of these picks. The timing just hasn't been right. But for those that went there recently and really identified those fixtures and Man City's form, fair play, because it has really paid off. And now with those upcoming fixtures, you could argue Foden is a sell, but with his form, I would be looking to keep him if you have him. And for those that haven't invested in Foden yet, it's probably not worth purchasing at this moment in time. You've got Anthony Gordon facing Southampton away, and to be honest, Newcastle might not be worth investing in long term. Brian Mbeumo would be a great midfielder to buy right now. Maybe Bournemouth assets like Clover and Semenyo in a couple of weeks' time, but I'll talk about this later in this video. But Phil Foden, I think, is a hold rather than a purchase at this moment in time, but he can do well against Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, and even Liverpool if Man City continue to create the chances they have been doing and Foden plays to that level, because when he's on it, he's one of the best players in the Premier League. He has 6 goals and 3 assists this season, 35 key passes and 80 FPL points. It was pretty much months of misery and pain of Phil Foden, but the last couple of matches have been spectacular to say the least. His underlying stats aren't particularly great, 7 big chances and 6 big chances created, but I think Phil Foden is a hold. The best right back in the Premier League this season has been Aina, from my perspective. He got an assist in a 3-2 victory over Southampton. It was a great first half from Nottingham Forest, although you could argue in terms of underlying stats, there were signs that Southampton would cause some problems in the second half, and you have to give the Saints credit because they produced a brilliant response and almost equalised at the very end, and Aina made a very clutch clearance actually. He's got 2 goals and 1 assist for the season, but the reason why he has been so good in FPL is the bonus points. 15 for the campaign, which isn't going to be Trent levels once we get to the end of the season, but for his price tag, especially at the price he started at, I think Aina is offering exceptional value, and if you got the funds, he might be worth the extra millions over Milenkovic and Nico Williams, but not necessarily now with those upcoming fixtures against Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham. Then you've got Newcastle, Arsenal and Manchester City. You've got that Gameweek 29 plum fixture against Ipswich Town, which will be a blank game week, so Nottingham Forest assets will be very useful to navigate that blank game week without the use of the free hit potentially, but Aina is more of a hold than a purchase. A lot of people are looking to buy him in, but I don't see many clean sheets on paper at least over the next couple of weeks. But Nottingham Forest can be surprising. Against Southampton, they failed to deliver on the clean sheet front, but they might get 1 or 2 over the next 4 game weeks. But ultimately, Aina isn't really a purchase. I think there are better defenders to invest in at this moment in time, and the priority would be those Liverpool defenders like Konate, Van Dijk, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. Over the last 6 game weeks, Jackson has 1 assist and 13 FPL points. It's simply not good enough. And recently I discussed holding Foden, which obviously paid off for some people, but I also talked about holding Jackson, and that just hasn't paid off whatsoever. I think he's a sell at this stage. He can do really well against West Ham. I'm backing him to haul in that game, but is it worth keeping him just for that one massive haul? He's got Man City away, who are looking to be in decent shape right now, Brighton away and Aston Villa away. I'd rather just sell Nicholas Jackson and go to better forwards. You've got Gakpo for the double game week and Ipswich Town this week potentially if he starts that game, not to mention Jean-Philippe Mateta, Vissa, who's going to be a very good investment for the long term. So ultimately there are better options in this forward line, which includes Chris Wood. Despite the tough fixtures on paper, I think Chris Wood is a much better forward than Nicholas Jackson this season. So I think it's a very simple one. Great underlying stats like an XG figure of 10.2, but his finishing has been terrible, especially in the last month. So I think Jackson is a sell. It was only a few days ago, before the North London derby and in preparation for Game Week 22, I discussed buying Dominic Solanke because I thought he was going under the radar, but unfortunately, after the game against the Gunners, he picked up an injury in training, and some reports indicate he'll be out to 6 weeks, but we recently got another report from Gary Jacob this time, and he says the following: there is hope at Tottenham that Solanke will be back to face Liverpool on February the 6th, so that would mean he missed the next 2 games in the Premier League against Leicester and Brentford, then it's Man United and Ipswich Town, if he can make it by that stage. But he has been overplayed, and it looks like a lot of the injuries he's picking up have been in training, which is definitely very strange to see, and he never really picked up any injuries at Bournemouth. But Solanke is a sell. You might want to go back to him in a couple of weeks' time, but that won't be the case as he's missing a great fixture against Leicester, and even Brentford away would have been very promising. He has 7 goals and 5 assists for the season, an XG figure of 8.44 and 83 FPL points. His ownership is going down, which is no surprise of course, and it's now 7.9%. And I do think Solanke is a decent forward in FPL, but ultimately he's going to miss 2 game weeks at the very least, and there are so many other options like I discussed before. Mateta, Cunha in a couple of weeks will definitely be interesting, but the priority right now will be the Crystal Palace talisman up front and also Cody Gakpo for that double game week. I'm getting a sense of deja vu here. Last month I talked about selling Saka because he's injured for several months. Gabriel Jesus suffered an ACL injury only a week or 2 ago, and that's why he was in the sell section. And William Saliba's injury doesn't seem to be as serious, but Arsenal are going to take no risks at all. They're going to be very cautious about it, and it looks like he's going to miss the next couple of matches, including Dinamo Zagreb at home tomorrow, as this video is recorded on Tuesday, the 21st of January, and also Wolves away. There is also a chance he misses Game Week 24 against Man City. But if you've got a double up or even triple up in the Arsenal defence, they've got good long-term fixtures. Their underlying stats are decent, but they aren't keeping clean sheets. That's 6 consecutive games without a clean sheet for the Gunners across all competitions, and they've crashed out of the FA Cup on penalties. They're 2-0 down in the Carabao Cup, and it's not looking good at this moment in time. They also dropped points against Aston Villa, despite being in a commanding position, 2-0 up, but no William Saliba. Definitely was very telling, and Aston Villa fully capitalised with some brilliant forward play. I think Saliba is a sell, even if he's your only Arsenal defender, and that includes David Raya in goal. I think he's a very easy sell to the likes of Trent, Van Dijk, Konate, or maybe an Everton defender like Mykolenko. I'm not as appealed by those options still, despite David Moyes getting a good result against Tottenham Hotspur, and you've got plenty of others like Munoz, Lewis Hall, but it's all about timing. Be very careful with some of these transfers because there's also blank Game Week 29 to take into account. Dominic Calvert-Lewin broke a 16-game goal drought against Tottenham Hotspur. What a surprise that is. It was a brilliant goal where he turned Archie Gray inside out. He's an 18-year-old playing out of position, to be fair, so you can cut him some slack, but Calvert-Lewin did very well in that game, and he's done a lot of dirty work for Everton this season, but the finishing just simply isn't there. When I started making FPL videos a couple of years ago, Calvert-Lewin once had 10 goals in the first 9 matches of a Premier League season. We're not going to see that again because his finishing has been woeful. His confidence in front of goal can be questionable at times at best, and ultimately, he still got 5 points against Tottenham despite scoring. He got booked in that game too. Ndiaye might be a slight preference for me if you want an Everton attacker, but honestly, the preference would be none of them because I don't think any of them would offer the consistency, and the goals will be shared. Maybe under David Moyes, they'll be more adventurous, and we saw signs of that against Tottenham Hotspur. But ultimately, it's the defenders and Jordan Pickford in goal, who's definitively the best Everton option. They're the ones you'd rather invest in than Dominic Calvert-Lewin. If he plays very well against Brighton, though, and maybe scores a goal and gives you a bit of confidence that he's going on a streak, you might want to go for a little punt and a huge risk, you could say, for Double Gameweek 24. But he is very cheap after all, with a 5.4 million price tag, and his ownership is so low. What could possibly go wrong if you buy Dominic Calvert-Lewin? And it's that Leicester fixture that looks extremely appealing, but he would only be a Double Gameweek 24 punt. In the long term, the likes of Calvert-Lewin, Ndiaye, who's a brilliant footballer, they're all skips, in my personal opinion. Justin Kluivert scored a sensational hat-trick at Newcastle, which is very impressive to say the least. It's not like the hat-trick he scored against Wolves a couple of months ago, and they all count, right? But in terms of buying an FPL player, scoring a hat-trick of penalties isn't sustainable or something that happens very often. That's why I talked about skipping Kluivert at the time. And you might be thinking, why is he a skip now? I think he's a good long-term investment, but I wouldn't be purchasing him in Gameweek 23 or 24. I think there are bigger priorities in the midfield, and ultimately, you want to fill your Double Gameweek 24 prospects with the likes of Everton and Liverpool assets in particular. I think with Bournemouth, they are great purchases from Gameweek 25, one of Kluivert or Semenyo in the midfield. Kirkers and Howson offer great value at the back, and I think apart from those four, I wouldn't look to invest in any other Bournemouth asset right now. That could change at one stage, maybe Ouattara, but he is quite wasteful. I think Kluivert is a good choice. He's the fourth highest scoring midfielder in the game with 108 points, but at the same time, a lot of his goals have come from penalties, which is worth mentioning. His XGI is 8.76, very impressive for a midfielder, but like I said, a lot of the XG comprises of those penalties, but that's something he has to his bow. That is a very appealing aspect of the game. He's 5.6 million on penalties, he's getting a lot of goals, and Bournemouth are one of the best teams in the country right now, and the long-term fixtures are sensational. But if you want to buy these Bournemouth assets, I'd be looking at Gameweek 25 rather than this week. That wraps up another transfer tips video for FPL, this time at Gameweek 23. We've got that double coming up very soon, and many blanks and doubles later in the season. Not as many as in the previous campaigns, but still enough to make things interesting with the use of chips like the assistant manager, the bench boost, free hit, wildcard. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. The most transferred out players can be seen on screen. William Saliba is being sold in droves. He's going to be out for several weeks, and Arsenal are looking very shaky defensively. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Our aim is to get this to 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 32,000 subscribers. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League Draft Hound, as well as Spotify can also be found in the description, and I'm also on Blue Sky nowadays. I post FPL, UCL Fantasy, and channel updates on those social media platforms. I'll see you very soon for the deadline stream and more FPL videos alongside UCL Fantasy.